Peter, what was the court hearing this morning? What was the first issue they had to address?
The first issue in the case is whether it's even time for a decision, whether this is ripe for deciding whether it's constitutional to mandate people to carry health insurance or pay a penalty. And the court actually appointed a lawyer to make the argument that it's not the right time to decide, that they should wait until 2014. But the arguments just ended, and the justices were pretty skeptical on that. They seemed to think that it was time to reach the main issue of the case.
And in terms of why it might not be the right time, this is basically going to one of the hearts of the claims against the law, saying that people who are carrying the insurance, who are required to carry the insurance, might have to pay a penalty if they do not carry the insurance, and the court saying we can't really do that unless these penalties have actually gone into effect. Is that really the nitty-gritty there?
That's right. It does get into quite a bit of nitty-gritty, which I was not familiar with before covering this case. There's a 19th century law called the Anti-Injunction Act, which pretty much says that if you want to challenge a tax, you have to pay the tax first and then challenge it. You can't do it before the tax is imposed. So the question is whether this penalty qualifies as a tax under the Anti-Injunction Act, and that brings you into all sorts of byways of the law, but the justices didn't seem to think that it did qualify as a tax. They thought the penalty for not carrying insurance really is not the kind of tax that's designed to raise revenue. It's more just something designed to force you to carry insurance.
Some people believe that the heart of the action will actually take place tomorrow, Tuesday, when the court begins to consider the constitutionality of the insurance mandate. Is that right?
That's right. Tomorrow is probably going to be the big day, especially after today. We know that the justices seem ready to consider that fundamental question of whether the Congress has the power to tell people you must carry insurance or pay a penalty. The challengers say Congress does not have that power under the Constitution's Commerce Clause.
And then the larger picture is what happens to the rest of the law if this one piece of it, which requires that individuals, again, carry health insurance or pay a penalty, is struck down. Will they hear arguments separately about that issue as well, Peter?
That's right. That's coming on Wednesday, and there are a number of different possibilities if the mandate is struck down. The whole law could be thrown out. You could have a few parts of the law that sort of rely on the mandate thrown out, or it could just be the mandate by itself, and each of those would create very different consequences for the health insurance system.
And not just the health insurance system, but people who are watching this case closely believe that it could help define for many generations going forward what Congress is and is not allowed to do.
That's exactly right. I mean, if you look over more than 2 centuries of American history, this has always been a question that Americans have wrestled with, going back to the Articles of Confederation, which were basically too weak to keep the country together as one, and that's why the Constitution came about in the first place. But you have other cases over the years where a Supreme Court, for example, said that Congress cannot require minimum wage laws. That goes back to the early part of the 20th century. And then it sort of reversed itself in the New Deal era. So there's always been a tug of war over this question.
And very quickly, Peter, before we let you go, for people not familiar how the Supreme Court works, they will hear these 3 arguments, these 3 basic questions today, they heard already, tomorrow and Wednesday. Then what happens next in terms of their decision-making process?
Then they talk among themselves and see who has the majority opinion. And someone is assigned to write a majority opinion and a dissent, if there is a dissent, which there probably will be. But all this takes place behind closed doors, so we won't know probably until around the end of June what the justices have decided. So it's a very long and tense waiting period after these 3 days are over.